Location, location, location. Pretty much everything in life is dependent upon where we are, not only in time, but also in physical location as well. And it really makes a huge difference as to where we are and what's going on around us. And today, that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about locations. With DC, as compared to other companies, there's a pretty heavy focus on cities and locations that are fictional, that we can't actually find on a real world map. And I think there are a few reasons for that. For myself, it kind of makes sense in that it establishes very firmly establishes a fantasy world. That the world of DC is not totally based in reality, and though there may be some very strong similarities between the world of DC and our own world, it's very clearly a different place. And when we look at that, when we look at like the various locations that are not actually in real world, it kind of opens the door to really kind of cool cultural backstory. Probably a couple of the biggest examples of that are Themyscira, which is or Themyscira, however you pronounce it, which is where Wonder Woman comes from, and the Amazons. Then, like in staying on the Amazon concept, there's also Banamigdal, which is another Amazonian colony where a bunch of Amazonians live, but which is vastly different from Wonder Woman's group of Amazons. Just like the USA and England are vastly different countries, and that even though we are joined by a common language, our interpretations of the language and how we use the language is also vastly different. Even between Canada and the USA, there's some massive differences between how the countries are managed and how the countries relate to the world around them. And that's kind of the importance of these different locations, is that each one kind of has a personality in and of themselves, which is really kind of a cool thing. I say that a lot, I know, but it really is. Like recently I was working in Gotham, and Gotham's got a pretty vast history, and when Tim Burton did the 1990-91, one of those years, Batman movie starring Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, he helped to kind of reimagine the Gotham skyline, and it being Tim Burton, he was able to put a really gothic kind of gothic feel to the place. I don't know what a queel is. If you have any ideas, feel free to let me know. But that gothic kind of landscape really brought the goth into Gotham. And even if Gotham is like a multi-tiered place, kind of like New York, for example, where there are the 5 boroughs of New York, even if Gotham has 4 or 5 boroughs, each one will be kind of distinct in and of themselves, and they'll have different feel. Each section will have a slightly different feel compared to the other sections. And I think that where characters come from would kind of help to define who they are. In the Pacific Northwest, for example, there's a lot of rain. In the far corner, like in between Oregon and Canada, like there's a lot of rain there, and that kind of defines maybe not an overall attitude, but it does help to kind of make people aware of like the growth of the area, of just like the abundance of life, so to speak. Whereas down in like say Louisiana, like especially down by the tip where New Orleans is, there's a lot of swamp, and that really kind of goes its own way towards kind of defining the location and basically the style of life that is actually down there. It's a combination of wet yet very vibrant as well. And then of course you get gators, which add their own I mean, animals do add their own personalities to locations, which is really kind of weird. In any case, if we're looking at just the TV shows that we've been seeing in the last several years, the big three cities that we see are, well, Gotham, because Gotham. But for the in the Quiververse, which is kind of where we are focusing our stories, the big three cities are National City, which is where Supergirl lives in Earth 32, 38? 38. Earth 38, sorry, there are a lot of Earths out there. Then there's Starling City, which is where Green Arrow works. And then there's... Did I say Starling? I meant to say Starling City, where Green Arrow works. If I said something different, I apologize. And then the last one is Central City, which is where Barry Allen the Flash actually works and operates. But in looking at it, each one is a little bit different. Central City is brighter. It's not quite as developed as National City is, but it's still a very kind of a positive place, and it kind of reflects the overall positive personality of the show. I mean, of course, there's some darkness, and there are dark areas, as you're going to find, but it's not as dark as, say, Starling City, which is industrial and dark. We can feel the corruption in Starling City, and as we go from episode to episode of the Arrow, we can really feel that darkness, that corruption. It's like an insidious kind of sickness that just kind of like creeps out at you. And like I said, National City is also bright, but it's also much more high tech. So it's kind of like, I can't even think of an example. It's kind of got a Singapore kind of quality to it. Very clean, very neat, very pristine, despite the fact that there are aliens all over the place, and the DEO is trying to keep the aliens under some sort of control. But in any case, it's a more modern kind of skyscrapery kind of city, very clean and neat and modern. But really, because of how these cities actually present themselves to the world, or more accurately, how they've kind of drawn people to them, really kind of define the kinds of people who live there. And that's kind of true for wherever we are, regardless of what language we speak, regardless of what our natural culture is. There is and will be that kind of location reflection, so to speak, of who we are and where we've been and where we've come from. So as you go through your world today and tomorrow and the next days, think about your location. Think about how important your actual location is to your life. Whether you appreciate your location or whether you hate your location, it will have a say, whether actively or passively, on your life. And it's kind of important. It's kind of good to recognize that. If you choose not to, well, that's your choice. But in any case, as far as the superheroes of the Quiververse are concerned, location is definitely very important. Have a good one, ladies and gentlemen.